Welcome back, and if you're new, welcome. Please like and subscribe. This is part 3 of our 5-part series of 10 of the most dangerous women in history. This week, we're going to be talking about a woman who killed 136 people and even maybe more. And then, of course, our second person is going to be one of the most famous. I wouldn't say most famous, but she's a very famous cartel hit woman. So go ahead, put your kettle on, grab your brew. So, in the 18th century, in Russia to be more precise, a noblewoman by the name of Darya. She was well known in the area for treating her servants with a hmm, unique cruelty, to put it lightly. But the true situation was far worse than the rumors actually were, and eventually she would be convicted of beating 38 young women to death. But they say that she killed over 139, but they didn't get a full head count, but she was charged with 38 of the women. This woman had a very salty vendetta against women. And she was a woman that was known for being a sadist who enjoyed torture, mutilation, and enjoyed physically abusing these female servants. She was convicted of murdering 38 of them, but it said that it was 139, with 3 of them being male. The rest were all young women and girls. And my theory is that she had this vendetta because after her husband died, because her husband did die quite young, she fell in love with a poet. And this man allegedly, I don't know why I'm saying allegedly, like they can sue me from the 1800s. But this man, rumor has it, left her for a younger red-headed woman and chose not to marry her. And how dare they? How dare they? She is so rich and wealthy. And it's not like she magically killed 139 people before anything was done about it, because there was many complaints about the way she treated people, but they were ignored by officials for a very long time until relatives of her victims were able to bring an official petition before our wonderful Catherine II, Catherine the Great, who sentenced her to be chained to a public platform for 1 hour, wearing a sign saying, "This woman tortured and murdered." She was later imprisoned in the basement and apparently spent the rest of her life there. This was after they finally got rid of the death penalty, so at this point they didn't really know what to do with her. So there was a lot of politics that did go into play because the queen actually needed her for other things. It didn't go into quite much detail. Like I said, it was really hard to dig up the research and even harder to find photos. And you can see in my earlier videos, like, there's painted portraits of mothers with their children, even the ones that were completely cruel to their children. But I was having a very hard time finding any portrait with her, with anyone other than a female friend. Hmm. Leaves the mind to wonder a little bit, right? But again, that part is just me. Now she was married to the famous Saltykov. Put the name here again, guys. I apologize for butchering names, but I am dyslexic. But this was a very famous, very wealthy family that she married into, and that's how she got her name. But she was widowed. She was widowed by the time she was 26. With her husband's death, she inherited a substantial amount of money, an extremely large estate where she lived with her 2 young sons, and a substantial amount of servants. Many early complaints to the authorities about the deaths of all the servants going on this estate were ignored. As a result, or they would get punished because if people complained about it, she would get away with it because she was very well connected to the royal court. She held a lot of power. So whenever she would complain, well, not her obviously, whenever people would complain, she would find out who complained because they would tell her who complained, and it would result in a extreme punishment that would eventually lead to these young ladies' deaths. So it was like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You don't complain, people are ending up dead. You do complain, you're guaranteed to be dead. Eventually, however, that petition did come into play, and it was presented to Catherine II, who decided to try her publicly in order to further her lawfulness. I guess it was a political tactic, like, oh, okay, everybody's talking about this, so I have to handle it at this point. But she was arrested in 1762. Now, she was supported with these crimes by several accomplices, and these people would hold these poor women down while she would torture them and also help her dispose of the corpse later on so she didn't have to do any of the messy work. Typically, she would strike one of the servants while this deceived the house. She would torture the women. Take three. Usually under the pretext of unsatisfactory work. She would slam them head first into a timber beam, or she would burn them with a hot iron several times, and then force the women to work after this, like cause her an extreme pain, and then she would have, and then she would just force them to go back to work. Since it, of course, now these women are suffering and they're in pain, which would decrease their level of work, which would then lead to more forms of torture. She would ridicule them and lash them the whole time they're trying to work, and then beat them further for not continuing to work. There was a lot of other methods that she would do. She would burn their hair. She would leave them naked, pour cooking water all over their face and head, and then she would give them lashings. And the worst ones are when they would get lashings in the frozen temperature. Because you've got to keep in mind it's in Russia. And during the winter, she would take them outside completely naked and give them lashings. And then she would also, now I did get this off a Russian translated site, but she would be, it says that she would pull the ears out of, like literally just ripping their ears off. And then, oh my gosh, oh, just thinking about it. Oh, but she would tear their ears off, and she would do it with the glowing hot pliers. So imagine glowing hot, burning metal just going on your ears and being your ears just being pulled off. And then on top of that, she was known a lot to with highly pregnant women. She would have people pin them down, and she would stomp on their pregnant belly, which of course back then could, and well, even now, of course, it could cause her to miscarry and cause also death to the mother. Oh my gosh, it's disgusting. And beyond this, she was also rumored to have been a cannibal. I don't know how true that is because everything says rumored. Now, she was held for 6 years until 1768, while the authorities conducted a painstaking investigation. And during Queen Catherine of Justice questioned many witnesses and examined the records of the entire estate. The investigation officials counted as many as 139 suspicious deaths, of which a vast majority were attributed to her due to her torture, her neglect, and her cruelty. So, after the 6 years, that's when she was chained on the platform that we spoke about earlier for 1 hour with a sign around her neck for humiliation, saying this woman had tortured and murdered many. Many people did come to look and speculate, and it's a spectator thing. During this hour, I believe it should have been a lot longer than that, but I guess different times, whatever. She was displayed afterwards. She was sent imprisoned in the basement that we spoke to in the convent in Moscow. And eventually, when she died, she was buried next to her relatives. Now, I'm going to refer to her as either the skinny girl or Veronica, but her full name is Veronica Miria Moreno Carreno. Carrion. Again, I apologize. I'm sorry. It took 17 years for Americans to understand me. Anyway, also known as Lafetta, which is the skinny girl in translation, she was reportedly to be one of the first female bosses of the Zentas drug cartel. Once also known, which is this is the very interesting part, but she actually used to be a very decorated police officer. Veronica switched sides, which threw off a lot of the Los Zetas cartel. She made a name for herself in the Mexican narcotics industry by being known as one of the most dangerous female drug dealers. Initially a police officer, so she knew the ins and outs. She made this drastic turn and aligned herself with the feared Los Zentas cartel, where she swiftly climbed the ranks and became one of the bosses operating in a monetary in Mexico. She controlled all major drugs and trafficking hubs in the region, establishing herself formidable force, as a force to be reckoned with the cartel. Her reign of terror came to an abrupt end when authorities finally apprehended her while she was driving a stolen vehicle loaded with a massive quantity of drugs. The arrest marked a significant blow to the operations of the Los Santos, highlighting a dangerous influence kind of wielded within the criminal organization. So she just had the worst luck. So, like I said, she was a very decorated police officer doing very well for herself. But it was known that she was taking bribes from the cartel and doing a lot of work for the cartel. I guess eventually she just got tired of trying to play the good guy and went all in and became a very notorious hitman and a very, so what I'm looking for. We'll just say a force to be reckoned with and feared by most. Until eventually she was arrested, and then it was all downhill from there because I don't know how long after the arrest this happened, but there was three people found dead, her being one of them, and she must have gone through the worst pain, the way they describe it, but she was actually dismembered, and parts of her body was found in a beer cooler on a Sunday. And so she was known as the first Lafita, the skinny girl, the skinny hitman on record for the cartel, and I guess she'll go down in history for that. I don't know. There was not an awful lot on this. Now, there's a lot of movies made on her, but as far as trying to get very tangible evidence, I did have to find a lot of my information off of sites I had to translate myself. But hey, I did it. But anyway, so that's this week's two most dangerous women. I thought I would go ahead and put the shortest two in the same video. Thank you for joining me on this video. Please go ahead and like and subscribe and comment. Please comment any case studies you would like because I do have a list of things I want to go through once I'm done with this series. And also, spooky season's coming up, so I will be doing a lot of reactions to scary stuff, and I will be doing the share screen. So all of my reactions will be brand new. We'll be looking at the stuff together. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me and grabbing your brew with me, and I hope you have an amazing week.